Maya Thompson's boarding pass was ripped from her hand before she even understood what was happening. A cold, sharp yank like an invisible slap, and then the real slap followed, cracking through the cabin like metal striking a steel floor. Linda Parker, the first-class lead flight attendant of Air Nation Airlines, stood there, her face stretched with irrational fury, as if Maya had violated some sacred order of this upper cabin. It all happened in less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds that froze the entire first-class section. 3 seconds that turned one of America's top pediatric neurosurgeons into the public target of an insult wrapped in uniform and distorted authority. Phone cameras rose instinctively. People smelled trouble. They recognized a confrontation they knew all too well, one that never began with the slap. It began with the look, with the silence, before dangerous words appear. With that moment when Linda turned around, her mascara trembling slightly with rage, her voice ice-cold as she said, "I told you already, you do not belong in this cabin." That sentence was a verdict, a cut line drawn between privilege and those who had doubted from the first second. Maya did not respond. She simply stood there, hand pressed to her cheek where Linda's palm still burned hot. But in her eyes, there were no tears, no pleading, no fear. Only one thing remained: a silence, sharp as a scalpel. A silence that had saved patients' lives. A silence that now made the entire cabin struggle to breathe. The unseen camera of the world seemed to zoom closer. On the left, Jason Miller, a 47-year-old businessman, stared at Linda, his face contorting in disbelief. He had seen Maya board from the gate. He had seen her scrutinized for every tiny detail. He had seen Linda spill water onto her documents. He had seen Maya swallow every protest like someone who had been forced to endure such things her entire life. But he never imagined it would escalate to this. Linda jerked her chin toward Maya's seat, 1A, the smoke-gray leather chair that cost thousands of dollars or required being the right kind of passenger to occupy. "Return to your proper place," Linda emphasized each word, rising as if she wanted the entire cabin to hear, "or you will be removed from this aircraft immediately." Each syllable dropped like metal. The air solidified. No one breathed. They all knew this was not a dispute between two women. This was a performance of corrupted authority and a test of the crowd's silence. Maya still did not speak. She simply looked at Linda, a gaze that peeled back every layer of pretense. The eyes of a surgeon who had reassured parents on the brink of losing their child. The eyes of a woman who had fought her entire life to stand in rooms where her skin alone was enough for people to ask, "Are you sure you are really a doctor?" Maya stood there steady and immovable, as if Linda herself were the one lying on an operating table. Linda began to tremble, not from fear, but from the sensation that her power was slipping out of her hands. She clenched her teeth. "Did you hear me?" Her voice cracked. "This is your final warning." Time slowed. Maya's hand fell to her side, the red mark on her cheek fully exposed. A passenger in row 2 let out a soft exhale. Another reached for the call button, but did not dare press it. It was a moment stretched thin, like a fault line about to rupture. And then a sound, slow, deep, heavy as a fireproof steel door closing. Footsteps, not fast, not aggressive, but weighted, the kind that shifted the gravity in the room. The entire cabin turned. From the front of the aircraft, a tall man in a charcoal blazer entered. His face was sharp, his jaw tight, his eyes cold as metal. He did not need to speak. People recognized power when it walked into a room without introduction. Linda turned, her face twisted as if she had seen catastrophe. Mr. Reynolds, Ethan Reynolds, 55 years old, owner of Air Nation Airlines, stood 3 steps from her. He looked at Linda first. Just for 1 second. 1 second was enough to unravel the entire narrative she had built on this flight. The cabin felt like its heartbeat was pounding against its ribs. Then he turned his gaze to Maya, and when his eyes landed on the red imprint on her cheek, the air collapsed into absolute silence. Ethan spoke his voice, low, heavy, cold, each word landing like a ruling. "Flight Attendant Parker, you just slapped the doctor who saved my daughter's life." Linda went numb. A free fall with no end. No one in the cabin could breathe. Jason's fingers clenched the armrest. A woman raised her hand to her mouth without thinking. No one understood what had just unfolded. The woman who had been humiliated from the boarding gate was the very person who had saved the owner's child. A twist too large to process. A moral reversal. A truth crashing into everyone present. Ethan remained standing, firm, quiet, severe like an executive order. "You will step off duty immediately," he said without hesitation, "and we will speak on the ground with lawyers and with the police." Linda stepped back. 1 step, then another. Her manufactured confidence shattered with every breath. Passengers who had remained silent now stared at Maya like she was a warrior forced to endure the unendurable. Phones rose simultaneously, recording the moment truth finally came to light. Maya did not speak, did not react. She simply stood there with that calm, silent power, as if she had lived through countless moments like this. But this time, finally, the one who caused harm was standing in the light. Just as though delayed had entered the first-class cabin, not with shouting or chaos, but with one sentence cold as steel. "You just slapped the doctor who saved my daughter's life." The cabin held its breath. This story had moved beyond the personal. It had become a story about society, about power, about prejudice, about the light at the end of the tunnel, and about a woman who had once stood for hours in an operating room to keep a child's heart beating, now forced to stand in an airplane cabin to prove she belonged here. What comes next will reveal one truth. This was not just an in-flight incident. This was the opening move in a confrontation with an entire system. Linda froze after hearing her name called once more in Ethan Reynolds' voice, but that was only the opening tremor of the quiet storm building inside the first-class cabin. When the owner of the airline appeared, the power in the air shifted, like sudden pressure drop yet. Before that moment, the entire flight had already been carrying undercurrents of injustice, waiting to erupt. Maya Thompson had never felt the need to prove she belonged anywhere. Her achievements had done that for her for many years. But the moment she stepped up to the Air Nation boarding counter, she felt a weight of suspicion settle on her shoulders, like a heavy cloak. Linda Parker stood behind the counter, her smile thin as tightened thread, her eyes scanning Maya from shoes to hair. It was not the gaze of someone serving a customer. It was an assessment, a silent question. "Why are you standing here?" Maya handed over her boarding pass, maintaining a polite and steady tone, but Linda rotated the ticket in her hand, as if examining evidence from a crime scene. No passenger before Maya had been asked for identification. But Maya was. No passenger before Maya had been questioned repeatedly about the purpose of their trip. But Maya was. No one else had to prove they deserved a first-class seat. But Maya had to. As she walked down the jet bridge, her ticket trembled slightly in her hand. not from fear, but from the exhaustion of living through the same story so many times that it no longer felt like fiction. Maya placed her luggage in the overhead bin, sat in 1A, fastened her seatbelt, and breathed deeply to center herself before the conference ahead. But Linda entered the cabin like a sudden cold wind, snuffing out what little calm remained in an already draining morning. When she passed Maya, she stopped. Her expression stuttered. A smile vanished. A pause hung in the air as if Maya had taken a seat that wasn't hers. Maya gently asked for a glass of water like any other passenger, but Linda ignored her and instead turned to serve the white man beside her, a glass of champagne placed atop a white cloth. The smile bloomed fully. The eyes softened. A shift as clear as an invisible line, splitting the cabin into two worlds. Maya said nothing. She opened her presentation documents, reading each line in silence, while Linda's coldness wrapped around her like a dense fog. Then the clang of a metal tray hitting the edge of the seat behind her flipped everything upside down. A splash of water shot across Maya's documents. Drops spread and seeped into the most important page, blurring the ink like a fresh wound. Linda offered an empty apology, barely enough to meet protocol, yet not enough to mask the flicker of petty satisfaction in her eyes. Maya asked for tissues. Linda pointed toward the lavatory, as though Maya were an inconvenience. Jason Miller watched from across the aisle. He leaned slightly forward, his gaze forming a silent conclusion. This was not accidental. Maya took the tissue Jason handed her, blotting each drop of water with slow, precise movements like stitching torn skin. But inside she felt an undercurrent rise, not anger, but alertness, an instinct that had saved countless patients, the instinct that the storm had not arrived yet. She would need the steadiness of a scalpel placed exactly where it needed to be. Linda returned once more, eyes flicking down to the wet documents, then back to Maya, with the look one gives a mistake, waiting to be corrected. Maya lifted her gaze. No avoidance. No retreat. Her eyes were as still as an operating room window, eyes that made Linda feel her confidence drain like a dimming bulb. Linda turned away. But Maya knew. This was not the end. It was a warning, a sign, an opening note in a sequence she had endured far too many times in her life, being doubted, questioned, diminished, pushed out of spaces she had earned with sweat resilience and brilliance. When Maya looked at the blurred page, she did not see damage. She saw something else. A premonition, a sense that this flight was preparing to test her in ways the outside world would never understand, except for those who shared her skin tone. A test not found in any medical curriculum, yet one that black physicians had been forced to pass throughout their entire careers. And Maya, in the tremor of the cabin as the plane prepared to taxi, felt that familiar truth return. This battle had not begun in the sky. It began on the ground, in Linda's first glance, and it would escalate. She just did not know that by the end of this flight, the very woman trying to humiliate her would be forced to face a truth too large, too sharp, capable of splitting her life open before the eyes of the world. Linda hurriedly pushed the service cart toward the front of the first-class cabin, but not to work. Her eyes kept darting toward Maya as if she were monitoring a dangerous subject. Maya felt that surveillance clearly, that invisible tailing like a dull blade dragging across skin, not enough to draw blood, but enough to sting endlessly. She tried to continue reviewing her presentation, each chart and equation, but the instincts of someone who had lived under prejudice her entire life were warning her Linda was not finished. She never stopped at just that. The fragile quiet of the cabin was torn apart when commotion erupted from the rear section. A young flight attendant rushed forward, face pale with panic. Maya heard 3 words enough for her body to react before her mind even processed them. There is someone seizing. Her hands were already unlocking her seatbelt. The medical kit under the seat slid into her grip with practiced ease. Jason had not even managed to stand before he saw Maya glide past. A sharp, powerful motion, the movement of someone who understood that every second could tilt between life and death. But Linda, as if the world revolved around her arrogant need for control, stepped forward to block the aisle. Her eyes narrowed, distrustful, obstructive. "Where are you going?" Linda asked, with the tone of someone misusing authority. Maya answered succinctly, "I am a doctor. Let me through." But Linda raised her arm across Maya's chest. An action anyone could see was meant to do nothing but humiliate. "We need a real doctor," Linda said, voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Not a nurse. Not someone claiming to be one." Maya stopped for 1 second. 1 second long enough for Linda to believe she had just scored another petty victory in her imagined power struggle. But then Maya opened her bag, pulled out her medical license and credentials, and held them at Linda's eye level. No extra words. No pleading. Just absolute razor-sharp truth. Linda still stared with the scrutiny of someone who chose the conclusion before the evidence. These papers could be fake. The words dropped heavily like a stone, breaking the surface of still water. A ripple of discomfort spread across the cabin. Jason shot out of his seat. "She is a real doctor." We all saw her preparing medical equipment. An older passenger behind them added, "Goodness, what are you waiting for? Let her go." But Linda remained planted in place, clinging to her hollow authority, like soap foam pretending to be steel. "I am following proper procedure." Maya did not argue. She did not need to. She only said one sentence, soft, yet cutting with the precision of a laser scalpel. "The boy's life matters more than your ego." Linda's petty anger flickered, but before she could retort, the young attendant rushed back, terrified. "The boy is about to stop breathing." Those words sliced through the air like a trigger being pulled. Linda was forced to step aside. Maya moved past her, without looking back, without holding grudges, without wasting another breath on something unworthy. She focused solely on what mattered, saving a life. In the rear cabin, the child lay seizing on the floor, his mother desperately holding his hand, with no idea what to do. Passengers backed away in panic, forming a wide circle. Maya knelt her hands, moving fast, precise, powerful like a conductor, guiding an orchestra of survival. She supported the boy's head to prevent injury. She checked his airway. She checked his pupils. She instructed one attendant to bring a blanket, another to bring the first aid kit. No one argued. In that moment, no one dared. Linda followed behind, but instead of helping, she stood with arms crossed, lips tightened, as if waiting for Maya to make a mistake. "Maybe you should do CPR," Linda suggested loudly enough to confuse the bystanders. Maya did not look at her. "No one performs CPR on a seizing patient. You will kill him if you do." Her voice was firm, not raised, but forged from tempered steel. The seizure subsided. The boy's breathing returned in slow, steady waves. His heart rate stabilized. His mother broke into tears, grasping Maya's hands, like they were the last lifeline in a dark ocean. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you, Doctor." Maya nodded gently, still monitoring his breathing. She did not smile. She did not bask. She remained focused, her calm, commanding silence from everyone around her. When she stood, the feeling of Linda's contempt clung to her back like an arrogant shadow, refusing to learn. Linda stopped her right at the threshold, between economy and first class, voice low but venomous. What you just did could get this airline sued. You were never verified. You had no permission to intervene, Jason exclaimed from his seat. Is anyone else remembering she just saved a child's life? But Linda turned sharply toward him, eyes blazing. This does not concern you. Do not interfere. Maya responded, with one sentence enough to make Linda's heart tighten with the feeling of being exposed. You do not hate me because I am wrong. You hate me because I am right. The sentence slid into the air, cold and sharp as a needle-piercing skin. Linda's lips pressed together, her hand instinctively lifting to cover part of her name tag, like someone who knew she was wrong, but clung to the illusion of being right. Maya walked past her, returning to seat 1A, but the atmosphere had changed. No more forced calm. No more curious glances. Only the bare truth Linda had let her prejudice govern an entire aircraft cabin. And Maya, without shouting, without anger, without theatrics, had made the whole cabin witness it, with the clarity of light slicing through darkness. Linda stepped back, but Maya knew. The most dangerous thing about people like Linda was not that they were wrong. It was that they believed their authority shielded them from consequences. Maya did not yet know that very soon the person with the highest authority on this flight would shatter that illusion completely. And Linda would have nothing left to hold on to. The air after the emergency had not even settled when Linda appeared again, like a dark cloud, trying to smother the light Maya had just brought into the cabin. Her steps were sharp, rushed, weighted, with the need to reassert control. Not the steps of someone performing her duty, but of someone desperate to reclaim a power shaken the moment Maya saved a life. Maya sat back in seat 1A, the smell of disinfectant still clinging to her hands. The boy's heartbeat still echoed in her memory, like a steady but urgent drum. But Linda did not allow her a single breath, not a moment to recover, not a sliver of silence, long enough for decency to return. Linda stormed toward her, as if she had caught a criminal in the act. Her eyes were cold, her mouth tightened into a line filled with threat. You acted completely out of line, Linda said, her voice low and cutting. And I am obligated to report it. Maya turned her head, her gaze calm enough to frighten anyone who held guilt in their chest. I saved a child's life, she answered. No raised tone, no defense, only truth. Linda placed her hands on her hips, the pose of someone who still believed she, alone, had the right to judge. You could have caused harm. You could have forced an emergency landing. We have procedures. Our procedures do not involve someone like you acting without permission. Someone like you. 3 words dropped into the cabin like a small stone with a vast ripple. Jason heard it. The elderly woman in row 2 heard it. Everyone understood what it meant. Maya said nothing, but her eyes that had remained steady through dozens of traumatic brain injuries in the operating room stared directly at Linda without blinking. A silence so composed that Linda involuntarily stepped back half a pace, not even understanding why her body reacted that way. Maya reached into her bag and picked up a tissue, wiping the faint smear of ink left from the page Linda had soaked earlier. Linda noticed the movement, and somehow it ignited an even deeper anger. Anger because Maya remained calm. Anger because Maya did not bow. Anger because Maya did not fit the chaotic stereotype Linda imposed on people who looked like her. "Who do you think you are?" Linda asked, her voice dripping venom. "You walk into this cabin like you are important. Then you interrupt my procedures, make me look like I am not doing my job." No one had interrupted any procedure. Only a woman who allowed her bias to decide who deserved help. Maya folded the tissue neatly and placed it in the trash pocket. A small gesture, but full of control. "If you feel threatened," Maya said softly, "it is because I did the job you should have done." One sentence, one clean incision. Linda inhaled sharply, her eyebrows tightening into sharp lines. She stepped closer, reducing the distance between them to a single arm's length. Jason shifted, immediately ready to stand if needed. Linda whispered, but loud enough for anyone within 3 rows to hear a threat polished to a blade. "You do not belong in this cabin. The 3rd time on this flight. A repeated verdict of prejudice." Maya tightened her grip on the strap of her medical bag, not out of fear, but because she had heard that sentence too many times in too many rooms. Not the first time, not the first place. But this time, Linda had no idea she was the one standing in the wrong place. The young flight attendant who had witnessed the emergency approached with a glass of water for Maya, but Linda snatched the tray before it reached Maya's hand. "Do not serve her," Linda said sharply. "I am dealing with a violation." The young woman froze, stunned. Passengers fell silent, horrified that a lead flight attendant could show such open hostility towards someone who had just saved a child's life. Maya looked directly at Linda. This time she did not remain silent. "You want to file a report?" Maya asked. "Do it." Her voice was firm, clear, each word falling like cold metal. "I will also be filing a report documenting how you obstructed a medical emergency." Linda's face drained of color for a moment, as if she had just been struck across her pride. But she straightened her shoulders again, clinging to her uniform as if it could shield her from accountability. "You will not get away with this," Linda said. "I will make sure this goes straight to management." Maya did not flinch. "Good," she replied. "That is exactly where it should go." The passengers around them looked at Maya with newfound admiration and astonishment. A quiet, commanding strength, a power that required no shouting, no threats, no proof. It simply existed like gravity. Linda could not tolerate it. She turned away, but her eyes remained tense and watchful, a hostility born from fear that Maya had shattered the mold she had tried so hard to force her into from the very beginning. As the plane trembled lightly through a current of air, Maya sensed that every movement was signaling something larger on the horizon. A storm waiting for the right moment to break. But what Maya did not know, what she could not possibly foresee, was that she was about to step into the moment that would flip the entire story. A moment that would strip Linda not only of temporary authority, but of the illusion that she could escape consequence. A moment approaching with heavy, deliberate, echoing footsteps. The moment when the most powerful man in the airline would step into the cabin, and Linda, who believed she ruled the sky, would learn she had just crossed the one person she should never have touched. Maya rose from her seat to stretch her legs when the cabin finally quieted after the invisible storm that only she and the attentive few fully sensed. But the moment she stepped a single pace away from one, Linda appeared, as if she had attached an alarm to every movement Maya made. That speed did not belong to someone performing her duty. It was the speed of a pursuer. "Where are you going?" Linda asked, her voice loud enough to turn a question into an accusation. "Restroom," Maya replied simply. Linda blocked her, immediately standing so close that Maya could see the mascara beginning to clump at the corners of her eyes, the result of the tension she herself had created. "No. Sit down. We are about to begin our descent." Maya glanced at the sign above them. The indicator was still off. It was clear Linda was inventing new rules on the spot. "The sign is off," Maya said, her voice not raised but sharp as a cold incision. "I will be quick." Linda stepped half a pace closer, sealing the passage completely. "I said you are not going. Do not make me report another violation." Maya felt the weight of the cabin's gaze gather around her, like an invisible hand tightening around her throat. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew exactly what was coming. Moments like this were not new in her life. They always began with someone believing they had permission to control the space she occupied, and ended with that same person punishing her for refusing to bend. Linda, Maya said, calling her by name for the first time, her voice low but heavy as lead. "Move." In that instant, Linda let out a laugh, a twisted sound as if she had just heard the greatest insult of her life. "You are being aggressive," Linda declared loudly for the entire cabin. "I am instructing you to return to your seat immediately." Jason shot up from his seat across from them, his face hard. "Aggressive. She is trying to go to the restroom." Linda ignored him completely. She only looked at Maya, and what Maya saw in her eyes was no longer annoyance, no longer bias, but fear. Fear of being revealed. Fear that Maya, through calm competence, was stripping her veneer, layer by layer in front of witnesses. "Return to your seat, Linda," said, emphasizing each word like a sentence being pronounced. Maya did not step back, did not flinch, did not tremble. "I am going to the restroom," she said calmly and firmly, "and you do not have the authority to stop me while the indicator is off." And at that moment, like a spark falling onto the trail of gasoline Linda had spread since the beginning of the flight, Linda lifted her hand. A violent motion. Hot. Sudden. Shocking. Then a sharp crack filled the cabin. The slap landed loud and brutal like a muffled gunshot. Maya's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning red like a fresh blister. The entire cabin froze. No one breathed. All sound collapsed into the void between those two horrific seconds. An elderly woman in row 2 covered her mouth. Jason cursed under his breath and lunged toward Maya. A young man pulled out his phone by sheer instinct. Linda stood, paralyzed, her hand still suspended in the air, as if even she had not fully understood what she had done. Her expression twisted into a grotesque realization. Not regret, but the dawning awareness that she had just crossed into forbidden territory, a place where consequences were real. Maya slowly raised her hand to her cheek, a simple gesture, but the silence surrounding it chilled the entire cabin. No tears, no whimper. Only one deep, steady breath, the kind she took before entering an operating room, not after being assaulted. Linda stepped back. A long shadow stretched across the aisle. Maya sensed the shift not from sound, but from the air itself. The cabin felt as if it had been pulled into a different gravity pressure, tightening, before releasing in one collective inhale. Jason's voice broke the stillness before minds could catch up. "Oh my God, he is here!" Maya turned her head. A tall man, walking with the weight of command, was approaching from the cockpit. A black blazer, a grey tie, a posture that allowed no one to look away. His eyes locked onto Maya first, then shifted to Linda. Ethan Reynolds, owner of Air Nation Airlines. His face was so cold the cabin lights reflected off his cheekbones like blades. Every step he took made the floor tremble, not from weight, but from authority. He stopped exactly 3 steps from Linda. No one in the cabin spoke. No one moved. The air became glass taut, clear fragile. Ethan looked at Maya. For 1 second. 1 second long enough for the fire of outrage in his eyes to ignite without a single shout. Then he turned to Linda. "You just slapped the doctor who saved my daughter's life." No raised volume, no yelling. But the weight of his words shattered Linda's composure, forcing her back another full step until her spine nearly touched the cabin wall. Maya stood tall. No reaction, no attempt to explain. She let the truth fill the cabin like a tidal wave. Ethan required no further information. He delivered his order in a tone that allowed no disobedience. Step off duty. Sit in the jump seat. Now. Linda opened her mouth, but no sound came. Every justification died when it met Ethan's stare. Jason slowly lowered himself back into his seat, letting out a long breath. The elderly woman in row 2 began to cry softly, as if witnessing the universe correcting its balance. And Maya, though her cheek remained red, maintained that quiet, unwavering power. A strength that did not shout, did not strike back, did not need to defend itself. A strength that forced the wrongdoer into the light, without Maya lifting a finger. Ethan did not stay silent. He would not allow another mistake, nor allow Linda to slip into darkness. He turned to the cabin, his voice clear and sharp. Everything that happened to Dr. Thompson will be addressed at the highest level, and I assure you, all justice will be served. Linda stepped back, and in that moment, Maya knew the trajectory of the flight had shifted completely. Not because Linda was caught, but because Ethan Reynolds had arrived, and the woman who had been slapped in first class, the woman Linda belittled, doubted, and humiliated, was the one person he would never allow anyone to lay a hand on. Linda was pulled out of the first-class cabin like a shadow dissolving under light. But the storm she had stirred still pounded against the aircraft, echoing in every glance, every breath passengers took. Ethan Reynolds's arrival had not restored peace. It had only shifted the tension into a different form of silence. The silence of judgment, of exposed shame, of a truth dragged out of the dark and impossible to hide again. Maya sat back in seat 1A when Ethan gave her a slight gesture. His eyes were not those of a CEO trying to save the image of his company. They were the eyes of a father looking at the person who had saved his family and refusing to accept what had been done to her. Maya felt the mixture of anger, sorrow, and respect swirling around them, but she said nothing. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood that in this moment words no longer mattered. The truth had spoken for itself. The nearby passengers straightened in their seats, as if forced to look directly at the story they had silently witnessed. The injustice they had ignored was now a weight pressed onto their laps. The elderly woman bowed her head, her hands tightening together. Jason's fingers tapped the armrest as though restraining himself from standing again. Others awkwardly lowered their phones, unsure whether to stop recording or continue documenting the truth. Tasha, the young flight attendant, approached with a slight tremble as she asked Maya if she needed anything. Her voice was thin, stretched like a strained wire. "I am very sorry for what happened. If you need water, a cold towel, anything." Maya shook her head gently but firmly. "I am fine." Even that simple answer did nothing to ease the tremor on Tasha's face. She understood that someone like Maya had grown too used to saying, "I am fine," even when she was not. And she understood Maya did not need water, nor a towel. The only thing Maya deserved at this moment was justice. Ethan returned after a brief exchange with the pilot. He stood beside Maya, not sitting, as though respect did not allow him to place himself at her level in such a moment. "I need to speak with you," he said. His voice controlled no longer the explosive anger from earlier, but a quieter, deeper fury, the kind that was far more dangerous. Maya nodded, her gaze steady, as if she were looking through operating room glass, analyzing the movements of a complicated case. "I am listening." "You were assaulted," Ethan said, plainly not softening the language, not using corporate phrasing, not blaming procedure. "On my aircraft, by my employee, and in front of me." His breath tightened. "I cannot accept that. Not because you are a doctor, not because you saved my daughter's life, but because it was inhumane." The surrounding passengers heard every word. They understood now that this had surpassed an incident. This was a verdict on a system that had nurtured bias for far too long. Maya inhaled deeply, finding balance. "I endured it not because I am weak. I endured it because I needed to stay calm to save that boy. But what she did nearly kept me from reaching him in time." Ethan closed his eyes for a second. 1 second filled with delayed fear. 1 second of a father imagining his own child and realizing that if the doctor on board had been obstructed to the point of giving up, another child might have died. He opened his eyes again. The look in them was sharp as a surgical blade. "This will not end with an internal report." A soft gasp rose somewhere in the cabin. Tasha straightened. Jason nodded. A male passenger whispered, "Good. Finally someone says it." But Ethan continued. "I will call the police. I will call the FAA. I will request every camera recording from the aircraft and the boarding gate. I will contact the personnel investigation team directly. And I will make sure not 1 minute of Linda's behavior is dismissed as a misunderstanding." His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of an executive order. Maya looked at him for a long moment, then answered with a calm firmness that glided like silk, but struck like steel. "I do not want this turned into a personal conflict. This is not just about her and me. This is about how women of color are perceived in spaces of power. How we are forced to prove ourselves even after dedicating our lives to being more than qualified." The cabin fell completely silent. Those who had sat quietly, as if disconnected, now felt themselves pulled into the light. They were no longer just witnesses. They were part of the truth. Ethan placed his hand on the seat in front and leaned slightly so he would be eye level with Maya, a gesture of genuine respect. "You are right. And I promise you, you will not have to fight this alone." Maya's expression softened for a brief moment, not out of fragility, but because for the first time on the flight, she no longer needed to brace herself. Then the overhead speakers crackled on. The captain's voice came through deep and grateful. "We would like to extend our sincere thanks to the doctor on board who saved the passenger earlier. Because of her timely actions and expertise, the boy's condition is stable." The announcement washed through the cabin like a quiet wave, striking each face, each lingering thread of shame, each pair of eyes that had looked away when Maya was doubted, blocked, insulted. Jason turned to her. "They should have said that sooner. So everyone knew who you were." Maya did not look at him. She looked up at the cabin ceiling, where the white LED lights glowed like the sterile lamps of an operating room. "They do not need to know who I am," she said. "They only need to know that no one deserves to be treated the way I was. One sentence. A moral blade honed to perfection, a truth bigger than any title. And in that moment, the cabin changed entirely. People no longer saw Maya as a passenger. They saw her as a mirror, reflecting biases they had ignored. They saw her as the focus point of a societal truth they had been too comfortable to confront. But Maya knew this was not the peak of the story. This was only the collapse of the visible surface, the submerged part of the iceberg. The real story would rise into view the moment the aircraft door opened and the police stepped inside. Maya's cheek was still warm from the slap, but not from pain. The heat was the final trace of something she had grown used to enduring being dismissed, even while holding other people's worlds together, so they would not collapse. And although Ethan had intervened, although Linda had been pulled out of the cabin like a criminal exposed in daylight, Maya knew the fight was not over. It had simply shifted into another phase, deeper and more dangerous, where everyone would be forced to confront the truth they had ignored. The first-class cabin held no more casual chatter, no sound of drinks being opened, no soft laughter coated with privilege. It now resembled a closed courtroom where everyone sat still to avoid being called upon. Passengers could no longer avert their eyes from Maya. No more pretending to be busy. No more staring into screens to escape discomfort. They looked directly at her. They looked because they understood they had witnessed something indefensible. They looked because they knew silence had made them complicit. Jason was the first to break the silence. He leaned forward, his voice low, but filled with respect he did not hide. "I will testify for you, any time you need." Maya gave a slight nod, no dramatic gratitude, no visible relief. She simply acknowledged it, the way a surgeon notes a heartbeat, precise and uncluttered. "Thank you," she said. "It will be needed." A middle-aged woman leaned forward, her hand still trembling from how close the slap had landed to her seat. "I will too. I recorded part of it if you want it." Her voice shook, but her resolve was solid, like someone who had just realized silence carried its own form of harm. Maya looked at her, her eyes softening not in sentiment, but in recognition that the woman had stepped out of her comfort zone. "Keep it for me," Maya said. "It is important." Around the cabin, others began whispering, admitting they had seen, had heard, had understood. But the support, however genuine, came far too late. Maya knew it. Ethan knew it. The cabin knew it. These final declarations of solidarity did not erase the truth that when Maya was belittled, doubted, and diminished piece by piece, the entire cabin remained silent. No one stood up when Linda blocked her path the first time. No one reacted when Linda denied her a drink. No one said a word when Linda questioned her credentials with needle-sharp insinuations. Only when the slap exploded into the air, only when the violence became undeniable did they finally stir. Maya did not blame them. But she did not forget. Tasha approached slowly, as if walking on thin ice. "Dr. Thompson, we are preparing information for the captain. The boy in the back is stable now, thanks to you." Maya did not answer. She did not need to. She simply nodded, then looked down at her hands, hands that had saved countless children, hands that had been judged, dismissed, and doubted simply because they belonged to a woman of color. Suddenly, a young passenger in row 3, the one who had been recording since the beginning, stood up. "I also recorded the boarding," he said nervously. It is pretty clear." Linda was Ethan raised a hand to stop him, not because he did not want to hear, but because he already knew enough. He stepped forward into the aisle as though entering a chamber of judgment. His gaze swept across every row, stopping on the people clutching their phones, the ones avoiding his eyes, the ones pretending irrelevance, although they were witnesses. "Anyone with video, keep it," he said, his voice heavy as a command. "Anyone willing to testify, be ready. Because I will take this to the police, and none of you will be brushed aside." The cabin trembled slightly with the weight of his words. Maya looked at him, not with gratitude, but with silent assessment. He understood the gravity of the moment. He did not look away. He did not soften the incident to protect the airline. It was rare a man with power choosing to use it correctly. Ethan sat beside Maya, and for the first time on the flight, he let himself exhale. "I know you do not want to become the center of attention," he said, "but the truth is not going anywhere, and I will not allow anyone to blur it." Maya met his eyes. This is not just the fault of one employee. It is the fault of a system that allowed her to believe she had the right to do what she did. Ethan remained silent. He did not deny it. He did not defend it. The entire cabin heard her words. The entire cabin understood. A new truth had just been spoken heavy enough to tilt the air itself. Tasha gathered her courage and looked at Maya. "Doctor, I am sorry. Truly. I did not know what to do when I saw Miss Linda behaving like that. But I knew it was wrong." Maya looked at her. Not forgiving, but not condemning. "What matters is that you say it now," Maya said. "Silence has power." But speaking up does too. The cabin settled again. A different kind of quiet. The quiet of truth that had slipped out of containment. The quiet of people realizing they had just witnessed a moment where the rules of the sky mattered less than the rules of human decency. Then from the back of the plane came the soft sobs of the mother whose child had survived the seizure. Gentle shaking filled with gratitude. That sound broke the heavy stillness, pulling every gaze back to Maya, who sat upright, her eyes holding an unshakable calm. Ethan turned to her. "You saved their son. You saved my daughter. And you just force all of us to face what we didn't want to admit." Maya didn't smile. She didn't nod. She spoke one sentence light as breath, yet sharp as metal. "This is what I always have to do." But this time she didn't have to do it alone. The plane began its descent, a wash of dim golden light settling over the first-class cabin, but nothing inside it softened. The air remained thick, as if the slap still hung suspended mid-air, refusing to fall to the ground. The passengers sat still, not because they were tired, but because they knew that when the wheels touched the runway, truth would collide with legal reality, and no one would escape it. Maya felt the eyes drifting toward her, not with pity and not with curiosity, but with a new kind of awareness. Awareness that earlier they had done nothing, and now they were trying to correct that failure with a silence filled with respect. Ethan remained standing through the entire descent, never sitting, never leaning, as if his body refused to relax, until Maya was completely safe. His blazer wrinkled slightly at the shoulder, where his fist had been clenched too long. In his eyes, the initial fury had changed into something colder, a resolve that allowed no negotiation. "Security will be waiting for us at the door," Ethan said quietly, loud enough for Maya, but still heavy with intention. No compromises, no cover-up, no corporate apology, followed by dismissal. Maya tilted her head slightly, her eyes fixed on the cockpit door. "I know." Ethan looked at her, as though assessing a teammate, not a passenger. "You are not afraid," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement. "I have seen far worse than a flight attendant's slap," Maya replied. "But what makes me angry is that she thought she had the right to do it." Jason across the aisle nodded, not interrupting, but every line of his expression tightened with agreement. The elderly woman placed a hand on her chest, exhaling as if trying to forgive herself for her earlier silence. Tasha stood near the cabin door. Her fingers entwined her gaze, fixed on Maya. Not out of fear of being dragged into the matter, but because she understood now that what Maya endured was something women of color in spaces of power had been forced to carry their entire lives. It was the first time Tasha had witnessed it, but Maya had lived inside it for decades. When the plane touched down, the soft thud rippled through the cabin. A slight jolt, but enough to pull everyone back into reality. The moment of reckoning had arrived. No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. As the plane slowed and the engine noise faded, Maya looked toward the aircraft door, not with worry, but with the calm of someone about to step into a familiar operating room. Ethan pressed the call button for the cockpit, exchanging a few words. Tasha stepped aside to clear the path for him. When the door opened, airport air swept in colder and sharper, carrying with it the heavy footsteps of the security officers waiting outside. 3 men in deep navy uniforms stood tall, scanning the cabin quickly to locate Maya and Linda. A female officer stepped forward, her voice firm. "Dr. Maya Thompson." Maya rose, her posture straight, her gaze steady. "Yes." The officer nodded, respect evident in her eyes. "You are not being detained. We simply need your statement, and to ensure your safety." Linda was escorted from the back of the cabin, her face ashen like cold ash. No forced smile, no sharp tone, no powerful stride. Only a woman realizing the truth she tried to bury had returned to claim her. As Linda passed Maya, she tried to avoid eye contact, but could not escape the judgment of the cabin. Someone whispered, "Serves her right." Another shook their head. "I cannot believe this happened in front of us." Ethan stepped forward like a shield between Maya and the rest of the world. "I am Ethan Reynolds," he said to the officer. "I will testify to everything that happened." The officer nodded. "We reviewed passenger video that was sent before the plane landed. Prosecution will proceed." Linda let out an involuntary broken gasp. Tasha lowered her head, as if mourning a part of the system she desperately hoped would never return. Maya stepped off the plane between 2 officers, not like a victim being escorted, but like a key witness in a case far larger than any one person. Ethan walked beside her each step he took, stamping a promise into the air that this incident would not fade or be forgotten. Once inside the restricted section of the airport, the officer opened a door to the interview room. "We will handle everything," she said. "But if you need legal protection, we are prepared for that as well." Maya did not answer immediately. She looked around the room, white, bright, sterile, like an operating prep space. A neutral zone, a place where truth would be written down. And she stepped into it with absolute calm. Not because she was used to being attacked, but because she was used to standing back up after blows she had spent a lifetime enduring. And this time, the world was watching. The interview room was so quiet, Maya could hear the faint tap of the officer's pen against the table. It was not a threatening sound. It was the sound of caution, of someone who understood that what lay before her was not just an isolated assault, but part of something much bigger, a story about prejudice, about power, about the dark corners the aviation industry had allowed to exist for far too long. Maya sat upright, Her hands clasped her gaze steady. It was not the posture of someone shaken. It was the posture of someone accustomed to recounting events that should never have happened in the first place. "Are you ready to begin, Dr. Thompson?" the officer asked. "Yes," Maya answered. Her voice was even steady, neither trembling nor softened. It was a voice forged over years spent on the edge between life and death, where emotion must always come second to truth. She recounted everything: the suspicious stare at the boarding gate, the excessive ID checks, the denied water, and the deliberate spill, the interference during the medical emergency, the insults disguised as procedure, and finally the slap. No embellishment, no omission, no dramatization. Yet each sentence cut cleanly like a scalpel, slicing through every layer of Linda Parker's behavior and the system that had empowered it. The officer listened closely, writing notes, her expression growing heavier with every detail. When Maya described being blocked from reaching the restroom, the officer's jaw tightened. When Maya described the slap, her grip on the pen grew firmer. "You maintained remarkable composure," the officer murmured almost to herself. "Most people cannot do that after being attacked." Maya tilted her head slightly. "I am used to pressure. But being used to something does not mean accepting it." The door opened. Ethan stepped in, not hurried, not loud, but his presence filled the room as if the gravity had increased. It was not the demeanor of a company owner trying to shield his brand, but of a man determined to take full responsibility. "I want to confirm that everything Dr. Thompson said is accurate. I am a witness," Ethan stated without a moment of hesitation. The officer asked, "Did you see the slap?" "Not only saw it," Ethan replied. "I heard everything that led up to it. And I know Dr. Thompson. She saved my daughter's life. No one has the right to humiliate her. No one has the right to humiliate anyone like her." His words were not just for the officer. They were for the system. The officer nodded. "We will escalate this to the district attorney. Terminal cameras and passenger videos will be collected. This is a clear assault case. Linda was brought in shortly after to give her statement, but the difference was stark. Her face was pale, her eyes avoiding contact, her breath uneven. As she passed Maya, there was no contempt left. Only fear. The fear of someone realizing the world no longer stood on her side. Linda sat in the adjacent seat, but her voice cracked on the very first sentence. I was threatened. She was being aggressive. I was just doing my job." The officer set her pen down. "You consider slapping a passenger part of your job?" "I did not mean to hit that hard," Linda stammered. "I was only trying to control the situation. You obstructed a medical emergency. You refused water. You used discriminatory language." The officer turned her phone around, playing the passenger video. "Would you like to watch it?" Linda lowered her head. A kind of surrender, a kind of collapse, a kind of confrontation with truth for which she had nowhere left to hide. When the statements were done, the officer stood and looked at Maya with a rare expression, one seldom seen in an airport incident room. "Respect. We will protect your rights. And thank you for saving the boy." Ethan gently placed a hand on Maya's shoulder, a quiet vow embedded in a simple gesture. This will not be forgotten. Not while he held his position. The door opened, and at the end of the hallway, Maya saw something that made her pause. Catherine Reynolds stood there, her eyes red from anger and heartbreak. Beside her was a small girl with a high ponytail, a bright smile, and a faint surgical scar hiding under her sleeve. "Lily." "Dr. Thompson." Lily ran over and wrapped her arms around Maya, a small but fierce embrace that physically embodied the reminder Maya had saved her. Maya had saved this family's future. Catherine approached, her voice trembling but sharp with conviction. "I am sorry. No words are enough. You should never have gone through this, not after everything you have done for her." Maya placed a hand on Lily's back, feeling the steady breathing of the child she had once protected with the same hands that were disrespected hours earlier. "I do not blame you," Maya said. "But these things happen more often than people think, and usually no one stands up." Catherine wiped her tears. "We will stand up. From now on." The hallway fell into a strange, reverent quiet, and in that moment Maya understood something essential. The slap did not define her. But how the world responded to that slap could define the system. Ethan looked at Maya, then at his daughter, then at the door ahead, as if seeing the future of the company he was about to reshape. "Let's go," he said. "We have a lot of work to do. Not to protect Air Nation's reputation, but to transform it." And Maya walked forward, not as someone recovering from an assault, but as the catalyst for a reform everyone knew was long overdue. The press conference took place right at the terminal gate, not because Air Nation wanted spectacle, but because the media had swarmed so densely that no one could take a single step further. The entire area glowed under dozens of camera lights, as if the airport itself had become a stage where truth no longer had any place to hide. Ethan stood at the front, Maya beside him, with Catherine and Lily just behind. No prepared remarks, no pre-written statements, no PR team polishing words. Only truth raw, sharp, and strong enough to stand on its own. When Ethan stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell instantly silent. He looked around, meeting every camera without flinching, as if he wanted every viewer to understand that this moment was a turning point, not only for the airline, but for how society treated people like Maya. Today, on an Air Nation flight, a passenger was assaulted by the very person responsible for her safety, Ethan said. His voice was not loud, but it anchored everyone to the floor. "That passenger is Dr. Maya Thompson, the woman who saved a child's life on that flight, the woman who saved my own daughter's life 8 months ago." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd, shock, shame, anger. Ethan continued, "There is no justification, no context, no excuse that makes this behavior acceptable." He stared directly into a camera lens, as if addressing the entire aviation industry. This is not an isolated incident. This is the symptom of a systemic problem. Maya stood quietly beside him, not trying to become the focus, but unable to avoid being the center of truth. The camera lights reflected off her cheek, where the faintest trace of red still lingered enough to remind everyone that this story was not theoretical. A reporter raised a hand. "How will Air Nation handle the employee involved?" Ethan answered instantly. "She has been suspended immediately and is under criminal investigation." Another reporter asked, "Do you believe this incident involved racial bias?" Ethan did not hesitate. "I believe anyone who watches the video will see exactly what it is." A collective gasp swept through the crowd, not because the statement was shocking, but because it was the first time they heard a CEO speak plainly. And for that reason, Ethan added, "Air Nation will begin a full-scale reform, retraining, oversight, structural changes. We will not allow any passenger to be humiliated the way Dr. Thompson was." His eyes softened slightly as he turned toward Maya. "And I apologize, not as a CEO, as a man who owes you the life of his child." Maya remained steady, her gaze unwavering, but something softened faintly at the corner of her eyes. Not forgiveness, but recognition that for the first time, a man with power stood beside her, not across from her. When the press conference ended, reporters rushed toward Maya, but Ethan lifted a hand, gentle yet firm. Let her through, and the hallway opened up as though the airport itself parted to give her space. Catherine placed a hand on Maya's arm as they walked. "Do you want us to drive you to your hotel?" Maya shook her head. "I am fine." Lily held Maya's hand between her own tiny ones, squeezing tightly, as if trying to pour all her gratitude into Maya's palm. "Dr. Thompson, please do not be sad. My parents will take care of everything." Maya leaned down slightly, meeting the girl's eyes. "I am not sad, Lily. I am just tired of this happening to so many people." Lily nodded solemnly, as if understanding far beyond her years. Then something unexpected happened. A group of passengers, those who had witnessed the entire flight, gathered and formed a silent pathway on either side of Maya. No one spoke, but they lowered their heads slightly as she walked past, a silence more meaningful than 100 apologies. Near the exit of the secure area, Jason was waiting. He held a small stack of papers, the written testimony he had prepared. "Dr. Thompson," he said, his voice weighted with purpose, "I will go all the way if you choose to sue." Maya accepted the papers and nodded. "Thank you." "Do not thank me," Jason said. "Just win." Maya smiled. It was the first smile she had shown since the slap. A small, quiet smile, but carrying the strength of someone who had faced death in the operating room many times without trembling. As she stepped into the pickup area, Ethan appeared one last time before she left. "Maya," he said, calling her name with equality, not authority. "I want you to know change starts today, from this, and I will not let anyone water it down." Maya looked at him a long moment, weighing the sincerity in every word. Then she said, "Make sure it is not just change for me. Make sure it is change for the people who do not have you standing beside them." Ethan nodded, heavy, slow, like a vow being sealed. Maya stepped into the shuttle. The door closed. The San Francisco sky was softly gray, but not heavy, only waiting for its wind to shift. As the car pulled away, Maya watched the long stretch of road ahead. A road not easy, a road she did not choose, but one she was pushed onto by a slap, by a truth, by a system that had gone too long without being confronted. But Maya was not afraid. She had saved more lives than fear could ever count. And now she was about to save one more thing. An entire system waiting to be opened. An entire industry waiting to be healed. And Maya Thompson, the woman humiliated in first class, was the one making the first incision. From the perspective of a social justice expert, Maya Thompson's story is not merely an in-flight incident. It is a cross-section scan of real-world inequality, where prejudice can strike a person even in the very moment they are trying to save someone else. Yet within that same moment, we also witness the power of direct confrontation, the weight of true leadership, and the courage of witnesses who choose to step out of silence. Every timely action creates a fracture in an old system, and it is those fractures that open the path toward real change. If you believe that respect is a value that cannot be negotiated, then like and subscribe to continue following the stories that force the world to look at itself. And leave a comment with the phrase, "Stand with truth,"